This video examines how Syria has taken full control of all former United States military bases after a deployment that began in 2014, marking the end of more than a decade of direct U.S. military presence. The final withdrawal from Qasrak Air Base in the northeastern governorate of Hasakah completes a process that transfers control of key territories back to Damascus. The critical detail is not just that the United States has left, but that this transition follows an agreement to integrate Kurdish-led forces into the Syrian state. What remains uncertain is how durable this arrangement will be. If this transition holds, Syria consolidates territorial authority under a single national structure, reducing fragmentation that has defined the conflict for years. If it fails, internal divisions could re-emerge, particularly in areas previously governed by the Syrian Democratic Forces. If external actors re-engage, the withdrawal could become a temporary shift rather than a lasting outcome. The result will determine whether this moment represents stabilization or another phase in a prolonged conflict. To understand the significance, it is necessary to return to 2014, when United States forces entered Syria as part of operations against ISIL. At that time, Washington partnered with Kurdish-led groups that later formed the Syrian Democratic Forces, known as the SDF. These forces became the primary ground component in operations against ISIL, controlling large areas in northern and eastern Syria with U.S. support. This arrangement created a parallel governance structure outside the control of Damascus, particularly in strategically important and resource-rich areas. Over time, this division became a defining feature of Syria's geopolitical landscape. The Syrian government, led by President Ahmed al-Sharaa, maintained control over core urban centers and much of western Syria, while the SDF administered large parts of the northeast. The presence of U.S. forces provided security guarantees for the SDF and limited the Syrian government's ability to reassert control in those regions. The shift began with changes in both military and political dynamics. Syria's decision to join the international coalition against ISIL in November altered its position in the conflict, reframing it as a participant in counter-terrorism efforts rather than an isolated actor. This development reduced the strategic justification for a continued U.S. military presence, particularly as ISIL's territorial control had already been significantly reduced. Negotiations between Damascus and the SDF intensified in early 2026. In January, an initial agreement outlined a framework for integrating Kurdish fighters into the Syrian National Army. This was followed by a brief period of conflict, during which Syrian government forces moved to take control of key areas previously held by the SDF. By March, a revised agreement was reached, formalizing the integration process and setting the stage for a broader transfer of authority. Key figures played central roles in this transition. President Ahmed al-Sharaa met with SDF military commander Mazloum Abdi and political leader Ilham Ahmad in Damascus, alongside Foreign Minister Asad Hassan al-Shaibani and the presidential envoy overseeing the integration process. These meetings indicated a coordinated effort to bring former autonomous structures into the state framework. Under the agreement, Kurdish fighters are being incorporated into the Syrian armed forces, while government security units have deployed to major cities such as Hasakah and Qamishli. Control over border crossings and civilian institutions has also shifted to Damascus. This represents a significant consolidation, moving from fragmented governance toward centralized administration. The United States withdrawal followed this political realignment. U.S. Central Command confirmed that all major bases had been handed over as part of a phased and conditions-based transition. The final convoy, which departed Qasrak Air Base, marked the completion of this process. According to regional analysis, the withdrawal route was adjusted to pass through Jordan rather than Iraq, reducing exposure to potential attacks from armed groups operating in the region. The mechanisms behind this transition are relatively clear. As the Syrian government and the SDF moved toward integration, the role of U.S. forces became less central, with the primary objective of countering ISIL largely achieved and local forces being absorbed into national structures. The rationale for maintaining a military presence diminished. At the same time, diplomatic engagement between Damascus and Washington, including a meeting between President al-Sharaa and U.S. President Donald Trump in November, contributed to a framework for coordination during the withdrawal. Consider the first scenario. If integration proceeds as planned, the Syrian state reestablishes control over its northeastern regions without significant internal resistance. Former SDF forces operate within a unified command structure, and administrative functions are centralized. In this case, the withdrawal of U.S. forces becomes a stabilizing factor, reducing external military presence while maintaining internal cohesion. Now consider a second scenario. If integration faces challenges, whether due to disagreements over command structures, resource distribution, or political representation, tensions could reemerge. Former SDF elements might resist full incorporation, leading to localized instability. In this context, the absence of U.S. forces removes a balancing factor, potentially increasing the risk of renewed conflict. A third scenario involves external dynamics. If regional actors perceive the withdrawal as an opportunity to expand influence, the situation could shift again. Border regions, particularly those near Turkey and Iraq, remain strategically sensitive. Changes in control or influence in these areas could affect broader regional stability. The geopolitical implications are significant. The end of U.S. military presence alters the balance of external involvement in Syria, reducing direct Western military engagement, while increasing the importance of internal political arrangements. It also reflects a broader pattern in which local actors and governments assume greater responsibility for security following the drawdown of international forces. For Syria, the immediate effect is an expansion of state authority into regions that had been outside its control for years. For the SDF, it represents a transition from autonomous governance to integration within a national framework. For the United States, it marks the conclusion of a specific phase of involvement, shifting from direct military operations to a more limited role. What emerges is a moment of structural change rather than a definitive endpoint. The institutions, agreements, and forces involved are all adjusting to a new configuration. Stability will depend on how effectively these adjustments are managed over time.